I'm 28 and this happened 2 years ago, just a few days before Christmas. I had taken the entire week off from in-person work. At my job we could essentially schedule when we'd come in. I'd managed to rack up enough remote days to work from home the whole week. I knew there was supposed to be a big winter storm hitting the town around that time. With the holiday and everything, I just wanted to stay home and have some chill work days. Our company said we had to get our work done by its deadline, and it was up to us how we went about it. This meant I could really work whatever schedule I wanted. I always preferred sleeping in and working late. That day I started work around noon. The first several hours were slow and calm. I sipped on my coffee and tried to get some work done. Over the course of those hours, the wind got increasingly heavier, slamming into the window next to me, and snow slowly began coming down. By 3 or 4 p.m., it was already dark outside from the clouds overhead, and all the snow flooding the neighborhood. I was going to go out to grab dinner, but with the roads being the way they were, I decided to stay in for the rest of the night. I worked at my desk for another couple of hours. The sun had set, and the winter storm had come in at full force. I left the window shades open so I could watch the snow fall from my desk. But out of nowhere, a light flickered outside. I looked over and saw a thin beam of light moving around. It was definitely a flashlight. I leaned back from my desk and watched it for maybe 10 seconds before getting curious enough to get up and walk over to the window to see what was going on. Why was anyone out there? I peered outside, trying to look down the side of my house. I spotted the light, but before I could trace it back to whoever was shining it, it turned off. Or maybe went behind something. I couldn't tell. It was too dark, and the snow blocked pretty much my whole view. With nothing else to see, I sat back down. Honestly, I assumed some neighbor might have lost a pet. I didn't worry much about it and tried to focus back on my work while the storm continued outside. Over the next 2-ish hours, the house constantly creaked and settled. But several times, I thought I heard something slightly louder and more distinct. Enough to stop and look away from my desk, hoping to hear it again and figure out what it was. But how could it not be the house just making noises? The thought that it was anything else seemed far-fetched. That was until there was a much louder thud. It sounded more like something breaking. And it sounded like it was inside the house. I got up from my desk and walked into the hallway. Hearing nothing, then moved downstairs. Everything looked and sounded normal. Not that I could hear much over the heavy winds, but there weren't any more loud thuds. Honestly, I wasn't scared enough to do a full search through every section of the house. So I started heading back upstairs, making it nearly to the top of the steps when suddenly, click, the whole house went dark. The power cut out. I froze in place for a second. The entire house was pitch black. With the snowstorm outside, no light was even coming in through the windows. I couldn't even see my own hands in front of my face. I thought the storm had messed with the power. I began slowly moving back down the stairs, feeling for every step as I carefully made my way down. The basement door, which led to the breaker box, was at the far end of this hallway. So I started following the wall, tracing my hand against it to keep myself going the right way. When I started to hear something, I stopped walking. It was something moving, sort of muffled, and it was coming from behind the basement door, getting closer and closer until suddenly there was the quiet creak of the basement door opening. I could feel my eyes get wider. I took one step back and quietly slipped through the open bathroom door that was right next to me. I still couldn't see anything, and I felt like closing the door would give me away, so I left it open. Slow, quiet footsteps began walking down the hallway. I was holding my breath. The footsteps came closer and closer until I felt they were just outside the bathroom I was in. Then the footsteps passed right by the open doorway. I never even saw them. That's how incredibly dark it was. The footsteps continued slowly through the hallway until they reached the stairs. Suddenly, the sound of the snowstorm outside took over my hearing again, almost feeling amplified. The person could have stopped walking, but I took the chance that they most likely continued upstairs. And I made a run for it. I left the bathroom and blindly moved to the other side of the home. I made it to the garage door, grabbed my keys, and left out the side door to get into my car. I drove away and used the SOS device in my car to get in contact with the police. No surprise, the person was gone when they got there. From what the cops could find, after breaking in and turning off the power, whoever it was had gone straight upstairs and into the office. Then to the bedroom, and nowhere else. Which meant this person was definitely there looking for me. What's really unsettling is the person most likely knew me. They knew the layout of my house well enough to walk perfectly straight through it in the dark, and to go straight upstairs to my office where they knew I'd be. It could have even been someone I talked to regularly that I had no idea had horrible intentions. It made me question everything. I moved away, carrying paranoia about every coworker or friend. Since moving, nothing else has happened. Hopefully, I don't ever have any updates to give. But if something else happens, I'll let you know. Chapter 2. The Roadside Café Story submitted by Anonymous. I'd been driving since early morning, trying to make it from Minneapolis to Montana. It was supposed to be a quick winter trip. Just me, my old but trusty Subaru, and some crappy gas station coffee. Everything was fine until the snow started falling once I got a little further north and into the isolated parts. It wasn't too bad to start, just some light snowfall here and there, but it ramped up pretty quick. Around the time the sun went down, it became almost a wall of white that even my headlights had trouble cutting through. After an hour of this, the road was fully covered in snow to the point where it was really hard to tell if I was on the road. With how stressful it was, I told myself I'd pull off at whatever the next place was to wait out the blizzard. About 15 minutes later, I barely saw a light on the side of the road. It was snowing so hard I couldn't read it. The parking lot was small, but had 3 cars in it. One noticeably buried in the snow. The other 2 looked like they'd pulled in not long before me. I parked, and from there I could see it was a cafe. I was hoping for a motel, but figured if I was going to be stuck here, I might as well grab some more coffee. I got out and hurried inside, nearly freezing already. This definitely wasn't the kind of place I was used to. It was a very small, old-fashioned cafe with a bar near the front. 2 men were sitting there with coffee, and 1 woman was working behind the counter. When I opened the door, it was very quiet inside. None of them were talking. They all looked over at me and greeted me right away. Felt like an awkward silence. I thought I was just overthinking it. I sat next to the men. Turned out both of them had the same idea as me. Pulling in to escape the blizzard. I ordered a coffee and took the mug over to a seat by the front window. Watching the snow continue coming down and covering our cars, I also had a weird feeling about one of the men. He was older, maybe 50, and the best way I could describe him is that he looked half dead. I don't know if it was from the weather or boredom, or if he was just having a bad day. Strangely, after I left and sat at the window, all conversation stopped again. The place was quiet. We all sort of sat there in silence for a few minutes before suddenly one of the men got up and said something about trying to reach his nearby cabin before the roads closed. Nobody else said anything. I watched him through the window, walking out to his car and getting in. He sat inside for a minute. Then the other guy also got up and, without saying anything, left the cafe. I moved from the window back to the bar and immediately asked the worker what was up with those guys. She shrugged, saying they'd pulled in around the same time and had been arguing in the parking lot. From there, they hadn't said much of anything. She figured it was just road rage or something like that. I stayed at the bar for a while, talking to her about the blizzard and just making small talk. Over those 30 minutes, nobody else walked into the cafe. Eventually, I made my way back to the window to check on the snow, and that's when I saw both of the men's cars still there, but neither of them were inside the cars. Or outside the cars. They were just gone. This immediately sent a chill through me. It had been a while since they left the building. No way they were out in the blizzard for that long. I went over to the front door for a closer look, then decided to take a few steps outside. The sharp cold instantly hit my face. The snow still made it difficult to see. Aside from the harsh winds, it was quiet out there. No signs of either of the men. It gave me a really uneasy feeling, to the point where I wanted to leave. I dragged my legs through the snow to my car. The plan was to turn it on and let it warm up, but it wouldn't start. It wouldn't even turn on or make any sound when I turned the key. It had only been maybe 40 minutes since I'd arrived. My car hadn't had a single issue before that night. My gut knew one of the men had something to do with this. And then, as I sat in the seat still trying to get it to turn on, I saw someone. One of the men walking out of the woods behind the cafe. A dark figure covered by the darkness and snowfall. But he was heading back toward the cars. I quickly got out and rushed inside, turning the lock on the front door. The woman asked me why I did that and what was going on. I told her to call 911. She seemed unsure but did it anyway. A minute later, the man showed up at the door. He tried to walk in, pressing on the door. When he realized it was locked, he made eye contact with me through the glass and banged on the door. His eyes were bloodshot. His face was pale. But he still had that half-dead look. Through our eye contact and the locked door, I think he knew that I was onto him. He didn't stay more than 10 seconds before running to his car. When the cops made it, Only 3 cars were in the parking lot. The creepy guy had made it out. Unfortunately, this night didn't end with he got away before anything happened. The officers followed some faint tracks in the snow into the woods behind the cafe and found the body of the other man. None of his things were missing. It looked like it was just an act of violence. And just as disturbing, his car wouldn't start either. It had the exact same issue as mine. The ignition line had been deliberately cut. So with all that found out, the story pretty much told itself. When both men pulled into that parking lot, the creepy guy had cut the other man's ignition line. Then he just waited for him to head back outside, where he followed him out. With the car not turning on and no escape, the man was either dragged into the woods or tried running away. Regardless, it all ended the same. And with the heavy winds from the blizzard, me and the woman inside had no clue any of it was going on. Just 20 feet outside the front doors. At some point during those 30 minutes, the man had also cut the line on my car, which likely means he had the same plans for me that night. I was able to make it safely to my sister's place, but I never heard anything about the man being found. I don't think I'll be going on any road trips in winter again. And thinking about the image of that man walking out of the woods through the blizzard toward me, now knowing what he truly intended, still gets my heart racing. Chapter 3. The Dark Delivery. Story submitted by Jordan. This was around Christmas time last year, between Christmas and New Year's. I was back home for winter break. I still had bills and stuff. So when I wasn't busy with family, I did some DoorDash. It was snowing that night, but not enough to pack the roads, but enough for most people to not want to leave. So nights like these were great for making decent money. Orders were going fine up until 10 p.m. Things slowed down, but I was still getting consistent orders. This one was just like any other, except maybe slightly further than usual, 20 minutes away. My hometown was small but spread out, so lots of places were scattered on the outskirts in the woods. However, when I pulled up to where I was supposed to deliver, I was a bit unsure about it. The directions had led me off the main road and onto a smaller forest road, eventually to a spot where it looked like there was supposed to be a gravel driveway going deep into the trees, but it was completely snowed in. Nobody had plowed or shoveled it, and I couldn't even see any lights. I stayed in my car and called the customer, thinking there might have been something wrong with the address. He answered right away. The man sounded like he was mid-30s and a heavy smoker with that deep, raspy voice. I said I was at the spot on the map, but that I didn't see an open driveway or house or anything. The guy said it was probably covered in snow. The way he said it was like it should have been obvious. I responded saying I thought I could see where the driveway was, but I wasn't comfortable driving my car through it. He then gave some snarky answer. This was why he ordered delivery, and if I wasn't going to deliver it, then what was the point? I didn't totally agree with that, and it seemed like a really douchey response. But I just folded and said, okay. I didn't want him to cancel the order or give me a negative review, especially not after I'd driven all the way out there. Looking back, I've checked all the rules. If I don't have access to the driveway, that's on the customer. But at the time, I wasn't sure. So after he hung up, I got out with the order, locked my car, and started walking. It wasn't super deep, but with it being on a less maintained forest driveway, my car would have gotten stuck. And it was really hard to tell where the actual path was. I mostly just tried to follow what I thought was a clearing. But with no lights around to guide me, I didn't really know where I was walking. I kept looking back at my car behind me, seeing it get further and further away. It was my only sense of distance because up ahead, it was really dark and I couldn't tell where I was going. It all just looked like the same forest. And all of a sudden, there was a sound to my left. A crunch, sounding eerily similar to a boot stepping in the snow. But it was far, just barely in reach of my hearing. I looked out there, tried turning my phone light on, but it did nothing. I didn't see anything and didn't hear anything else. So I kept walking. The cold started getting to me, and the endless darkness ahead had me rethinking everything. I figured by this point I would have seen the house, or something, to tell me I was going the right way. I stopped in place. And I know it sounds stupid, but it took until then for me to think there might not be a house here. Like this was all just some sort of weird trick to get me out here. Standing alone in a snowy, dark forest, that thought was absolutely terrifying. I took my phone out and decided, if the customer didn't answer, or tried again to convince me to keep walking, I'd leave. I pressed call and held the phone up to my ear as it rang. It rang twice. Then I saw something in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, seeing a light far out in the trees. Then it suddenly shut off, and a half second later, the call dropped. I didn't even bother waiting or thinking anything through. I immediately started sprinting back the way I came. The crunching snow beneath me covered whatever sounds could have been coming from behind me, like whether the guy was chasing me or not. Probably made it even more terrifying, not knowing what was behind me. I ran all the way to my car, and before I even made it to the door, I saw something was wrong. The car was leaning on one side. I looked down, one of the tires was flattened. He had slashed it. I got in and started it anyway, driving out of there. I called the police on my way out. But aside from some questioning, they were kind of useless and really didn't seem to take the whole thing that seriously. To me, it's pretty clear that the guy was leading me out into those woods for a reason. And even went as far as to slash my tires to either keep me there or keep me from leaving. I don't know what I would have found had I kept walking into those woods. And I don't know what would have happened